currently do the moderation for the policy panel. Um, we're going to do this the same way we've done our other panels, which is that we have some prepared questions and everyone will get an opportunity to respond. Before you answer the first question, do a brief introduction of yourself. So one of the questions that we have is, what do you think is the most important thing that we need in the policy space? I think there's, in some areas, a lot of lack of policy guidelines. We had a mention about, like a HIPAA for ag data. What do you feel is the most pressing need for policy around ag data? Go ahead, Santosh. Pick up the microphone. Doesn't bite. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So, my name is Santosh Pitla. I'm an associate professor in the biological systems engineering here at Nebraska. So, I'm a researcher and an educator. So, most of my comments will be, my perspective as a researcher and educator. And I work in the area of robotics and automation and tractor performance. So, most of the data I deal with is on machine data. So the question, about this framework, the policy has to be producer centric. So in my view, so again, this is from my experience. I've seen many data conferences where we are talking about the apps and the user interfaces, and 99% of the people are software engineers. So there's a producer missing. I think a detailed survey is needed as to what are the producer needs. Again, the producer first, right? So, and also, whatever policy we are trying to address, it needs to be looking forward. Let's say 10 years from now, how are things going to be? How do we manage the data? So today, if you're thinking about precision ag, we talk about machine data, we talk about agronomy data, and then weather data. So these are the three big buckets. But what else is coming out there? So I work in the robotics and automation area. I could tell you that there's a lot of data that corresponds to AI. For example, environment data within the field, like LiDAR data. So whatever policy or framework that we're going to develop, it needs to be future compatible. So that's kind of my first comment.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jordan Dux. I'm the Senior Director of National Affairs with the Nebraska Farm Bureau Federation. We are the state's largest general farm and ranch organization. We represent just over 56,000 member families, a good portion of those being farmers and ranchers across the state. It's a interesting question. Actually, you started off correctly. It's the producer side first, and on the policy side, and this, I don't mean to make this sound too simplistic, but just given where our organization is philosophically, whenever we get into this space, and I have been dealing with this for quite a while, producers are always producer friendly, so producers can understand, farmers and ranchers can understand what they're signing up for, what they're doing, but there's also a fine line where you ask yourself, how much government involvement in this space do you want to have? We tend to lean. We'll talk to the private companies, and that's what we did. I was trying to remember when that was, back in 2014, I think, where I was a part of a larger discussion with several other state farm bureau organizations, similar counterparts to myself, as well as a lot of the precision ag companies, your tractor equipment companies, those types of things, and just simply going through the terms and conditions contracts and just doing that type of work to make sure that what they were asking producers to sign and what our producers were signing, that we all kind of made sense, and it wasn't just lawyer speak. And there was a lot of that, and there were a lot of us asking questions, why is this phrase in there? And it was a lot of, well, that's because of our attorney said A, B, and C. So trying to make sure that, if we can work that out first, and we can do that, then we can limit, again, just philosophically where my organization is, how much government involvement you want in this space, and how much we try to ask the government to interfere in or again get their hands involved in this because of unintended consequences, because of what could come next. Actually, the last presenter going through what producers are kind of the survey responses, my members are always very worried about what that data could be used for. And so when you start getting government involvement, that's where we tend to get nervous. That's where we get questions. And so we kind of have that first question before we get into everything else. And so that's kind of where we are to start with, maybe.
Hi, my name is Jerry Prange. I'm here today. I've a little bit of background, over 30 years in technology as well as agriculture. So technology has changed a lot over those 30 years. So I don't often get to get a butt in the seat as far as the tractor or the combine, but I do support all of the technology, the data, both looking forward and trying to keep things that we have in place running. So that IT background, as one of the gentlemen before, really allowed us or me to help a friend that I've been helping for 40 years get into precision type agriculture, and that's what keeps him in it today. So he is one of those 60 to 69 that he uses the GPS, the auto steer, the very simple things. Data usage, it's hard to say. We use what we use, but there's lots more potential out there. Privacy policy, things like that. I would agree that from with my producer hat on, generally less involvement or here's what you're going to eat is better for us. We do care about the land, we care about the water, we want to produce quality products. So just at a high level, less involvement is better. But if we are going to get involved, I would, my thoughts are data security, ownership of data. Lots of folks have talked about that is what are you going to do? How does it benefit the producer? That has to be a clear and visible benefit to the producer first. If we don't understand it or don't see the value into it, we're very reluctant to do that. So some of the enablers, again, that monetary and value add. So technology can do good things for us, but if wisely used.
Okay, Craig, I'm going to turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Craig Burning. I serve as Senator Fisher's legislative assistant, handle her ag, energy, environment, trade portfolio, and Senator Fisher is a rancher herself, so very familiar with ag, and certainly has a lot of interest in sort of the precision ag space. I'd say, when I think, when she talks about these sort of issues, I think some of the points that have been raised are things that are certainly on Senator Fisher's mind, making sure that the farmer's voice is there and at the table, that it's their data, and making sure that the end result too of whatever research is aimed at the benefit of the farmer. But I think just from a high level point, I think Senator Fisher's really main concern would just be making sure that a producer voice is in the room as sort of those discussions are being had, and would agree that government isn't always the best route. Sometimes their industry and working with the producers themselves can help to facilitate better outcomes than necessarily what legislation can. But certainly, I think that the overall point, just that a producer focus, and that the data and the research from any data ultimately is used in a way to benefit producers, that they are rewarded through through their data. So.
I'm going to just take 1 second in case there's any questions. Questions from the audience? Ooh. Okay.
Hi, I'm Alex Fuchs from the University of Arizona. And so I'm coming from a community that is very open in sharing. And about 20 years ago, we had similar discussions. So I put source code out there, and it was the same kind of hesitation that I just see in everybody in all these panels and discussions. So, ooh, what does somebody else do with my data? Huh? We had the same discussions in the open source community at the beginning, where it was like, oh, somebody else has my code and does something else with it. So there was questions of money. So how do other people make money with it? So surprise was, if you let the code go, it comes back in different ways. There are so many other possibilities to get an income stream from it. I see the same with data happening if you would just let go. And the game changer was to enable the individual, like what the person on the screen just said, like the producer itself. So the game changer was I could just plug a license in my code and it was accepted as a legal thing. And that was the big policy change about 20 years ago. And I could say, just acknowledge me when you use my code. So what would be a similar game changer? I don't know where the discussion currently stands for this game changer in the policy making of data here.
The open source code reference, went through this too. I really appreciate the open source community because they are very responsive. You get out of that non-proprietary mode. Many benefits with that. I think the biggest difference from a producer, if I'm wearing my IT hat here with open source code and going back to a producer, is trust. We haven't been able to establish or build that trust with the producers. So you're taking my data here, much like my source code on the open source, but I don't know. Maybe I'm not educated. Maybe I don't know how it's going to be used. I don't have a seat at the table. So in my mind, that's one of probably the barrier that I see at the moment.
Circular bioeconomy coming, right? So you can, for example, measure things that give you money down the line. If you put your data out and somebody analyzes it for you in a way that has not been done before, right? Can I increase carbon sequestration in the ground? Can I measure that somewhere in the data that is there? So is it just an education problem where the trust can be established by educating what possibilities would be out there in the future?
I think at least what I've seen is education is a great first step in that to educate. So if I don't know what the possible is, how do I know what to ask for or what's fair for my level of involvement from a producer?
And I don't mean to be really blunt, but I will be. You have to show, and you can put it first or second. I put it first. You have to not just show the theoretical profitability, you have to show that a producer will make money in order for them to adopt things. It is way too easy. I mean, it's agriculture in a lot of ways, food production has a very strong cultural component to it in the farmer rancher side. And that farmer rancher side are folks that obviously work hard. They are trying to, in a lot of ways, pass this operation down to the next generation. The way to do that is economically. And so they have been doing things, and a lot of these operations have been in one family and have done the same thing for a very long period of time. And so if you're going to offer new things, there is an absolute desire to try things in a lot of producers. There are early advancers, some of those types of things, but you can't expect producers to adopt things simply theoretically because you think you're going to tell them they're going to make money. You have to show them that this practice will will change. You will be able to make money in these three ways. And, you know, if there are side benefits in a lot of different things, precision ag has a lot of benefits in a lot of different places. But even as we start talking, you know, we're carbon markets and all those types of things, and the data generated is going to help producers go there. That conversation gets really easy if you can lay that out very clearly as to what the data you're providing, how that is going to truly, on a pure dollars and cents standpoint, that you will open the door that way first, probably.
Yeah, thank you for the insight. Totally agree with what has been said. So again, as a researcher who work with producers, what I think is how can we provide more value for the data that the producers are providing us, right? So just to give you an example, so if the producer knows how many times that one particular data file has been used by how many actors, I think that'll be a game changer. So that you can then incentivize, right? So, okay, this particular data set from 2022 has been used so many times by so many actors. I mean, if you can provide a breakdown of industry versus, you know, government agency versus nonprofit like universities, then we can actually come up with a really, really good value proposition. I think that is possible through some really smart coding, you know, and all that. So.
Greg, did you want to comment on that question? What would be a game changer?
I think the three of them brought a lot of good perspectives, and I don't think I have anything else to add on that question.
Is it on? Okay. I think it's important also to keep the distinction between open source software and open data. They're very different. The data is the proprietary information of the producer. And it would be like asking Walmart to open up its business. They ask their suppliers, of course, to do that. And sometimes you do it because they're Walmart and you have no choice. The other thing about ag in the United States is that it's a large number of players. So it's a very dispersed and group. It's not like you got to talk to 20 large farmers in Brazil or large farmers in Ukraine or Russia or something like that, and that will sway the whole country. You've got many thousands to do here. So I think that's kind of different. You've got to show, as you guys are saying, you've got to show value. Another question, though, that you might think about a little bit, since you're on the policy panel here, is how producers are required to report certain things. How does that play with their data? How do we streamline that reporting and also make it allowable that the producer still is able to keep the secrets they need to keep? In the model I'm talking about here is a regulator, in effect, and a need to fill out a form. And in what sense can software help do this without me sharing my data? And one of the reasons I'm asking, of course, is I have an idea about this, but I'll leave that for another time.
But I will say, so the data requirements, the reporting requirements, have a monetary component to it. They have to fill out certain information with USDA in order to receive benefits. That's the direct monetary component there. But I would also, and it's not just me. I think our colleagues from NASS would agree that it's difficult for producers to fill out some of the stuff for free. And they also, there's a good story. It's a true story. I'll keep names private, but there's a story of a producer, or of an ag lobbyist who walked up to a newly elected state senator and found out they were a cattle producer and said, "Well, how many cattle do you all run?" And she said, "Well, how much money is in your checkbook?" There's only so much they need to share. And so as university researchers, I mean, there's an obvious need there to try to do some things better. But again, producers will only share because it's highly, as you said, it's shrinking. Still a large number of independent producers, in a very competitive business, and so they will share as much information as they feel they need to in order to get some of that value. Again, the direct monetary value, and when it comes to USDA forms or crop insurance or some of those types of things they need to do. And then you have a whole nother level on the livestock industry. We talk about them together, but it is very different. Farmers provide a lot more information than what livestock producers have to, because there is no direct, I'll use the word subsidy, there is no direct subsidy for livestock producers. And so as we saw during, and we're getting into probably further than you all want to go, but as we saw during the pandemic, when there were new programs laid out for livestock producers, that was a whole new thing for them. And so how much livestock producers who are very independently minded, especially in the cattle industry, which is big in Nebraska, obviously, how much information they felt comfortable providing, even for a check, was a challenge, was a pretty real challenge. And so it is the same conversation that's probably been had by every single person in this room for the past 50 years or so. How can you get farmers to share these types of things? It will continue. It is a very large hurdle to jump over.
Since you had referenced absolutely correct on the open source. That wasn't the analogy. Is it's going to work the same? Really, it goes back to trust. Just like we're talking, if I don't trust you, and how do I get to trust you? Whether either I learn to get to know you, you educate me, help me understand the possibilities, but I don't foresee as a producer opening up. How many acres do you farm? What does it matter? Why is it important to you? So
Yeah, so agree. Again, I'm not very knowledgeable about this aspect, but one thing I would like to say is it's important to communicate why we need that data, right? So when we are asking farmers to report, and also I work a lot with equipment and robotics right now. So we have a field called human robotics interfaces, right? So if you want a farmer to use a robot, so how do you make it easy, right? So I feel like we need to have a field called human data interface. I don't know if that exists or not, but it's so important, the data literacy and asking about why this data. I think we'll have more success in getting good reports. So.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think, like Jordan pointed out, just from our office's experience, having to, I think the farmers in the state a lot more because of that monetary value have been more willing to provide data to USDA than we heard a lot when some livestock producers in the state for sometimes the first time were going to USDA to provide this information to receive some of the disaster or pandemic assistance that was provided. And there were a lot of questions. And I think still, sometimes USDA, is evaluating what information they need on what forms in order to actually streamline and get out the programs that Congress has authorized them to do. And, I think from Senator Fisher's perspective, she would, wants to make sure that, number one, the USDA data is highly, highly protected, and that, farmers and ranchers, when they're providing that to USDA, that there is not going to, it's not going to be used in a way that's in any way adversarial to them. And then two, just making sure that, that we're, from the government perspective, not collecting what's not necessary to operate and to run a program, but just USDA's data sets in general, even within the farm production and conservation mission area, one mission area at USDA has several different data sets that a farmer may have to provide USDA with the same information 3 times because it's going to a separate program that they quantify their data differently. So I think there's certainly an opportunity on the government end to think about how can the government better collect and streamline that process for producers. But there are challenges when you're thinking about the different programs within USDA. So, and I unfortunately am going to have to head out here. I'm actually flying to Nebraska here this afternoon. So I apologize, but I'm going to have to take off to finish some things up before heading to the airport.
Thank you, Craig. Safe travels.
All right. Thank you.
Make sure it's working. Hello. Oh, good. Okay, so last. I have a question from the audience. Yay! Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I have kind of 2 questions when it comes to policy. And the first one is like, if you have ever think about learning from other industries and how they manage or govern data, and what will be the lessons that we can draw from them into the agriculture sector. And the second is when it comes to the level of government involvement in this, if you have think or how you see the role of the federal agency, the USDA, in governing or overseeing the governing of agricultural data.
So to answer the last question, again, from my organization standpoint, we would not be overly comfortable with USDA being the center point of precision agriculture data. Other data is fine. We have, make sure it's FOIA, not FOIAble, those types of things. But in terms of like having USDA be the center point for that, we would not be supportive of that. Remind me of your first. I can't remember your first question. What was your first question again?
It's about if you have considered learning from other industries.
Oh, other industries. Yeah. I think that's a good question, and it's something that we've thought about a lot in terms of this whole conversation on the value of a producer's data and capturing that value, and the precedent that is set with, even just these. How you obviously companies that have phone. I mean, there's a lot of data derived from that. There's a lot of value to that data. So if you look at it from a producer standpoint, we have, obviously a lot of agriculture groups have this conversation of how can a producer, outside of just basic, how can precision ag help me make more money? The other side of that is my data has value. How can a farmer capture that value? How can a rancher capture that value? There isn't a great answer to that yet, in terms of how you work through a sale of that, how you estimate what that value is. I'm sure all of you have dug into that far more than me, but there's how other industries have done that. I think that's how we've looked that direction, but I think there's also a long-term precedent there where a lot of folks have given away data for years, and all of us give away data when we open this up all the time. And then a farmer, you have an industry now that's going to say, well, that's my data, which we support obviously, but then we'd like to capture more data from that. How do you do that when the precedent's been going on for so long that we've given a lot of information away for free? That's a conversation that we've been having for going on about 15, 20 years now. That's a good question.
From where I'm at, personally, producer, the USDA, same answer, would not be in favor of them, governing our precision data. As far as for other industries, aside, and I'll just talk about animal protein. We've worked on a platform. I'm not going to go into that, but we've built in steps to protect that producer, their data, and to be able to realize that value. That producer has to have a seat at the table. I have the key in my hand, and if you're going to leverage that data or get that data, there's some monetary incentives to do so.
Yeah, I think I agree with you both. So, in my view, I think it has to be a decentralized approach where producers have the right, and seat at the table, like Jerry said, in making big decisions and sharing of the data. So,
My name is Scout Calvert. I'm a research data librarian and chair of research partnerships here at UNL. And I love this fantasy where the government is going to take care of this data and curate it and do this work. I've been advising for almost 10 years on data management plans for people writing for NIH grants and NSF grants, and they've been begging, please, can you're asking us to share our data, but you're not giving us the infrastructure to do it. So, no, because the government does not recognize that preserving and curating data is an enormous headache that can't be done on this kind of scale in any kind of effective way. It really has to be done. It's so immense and heterogeneous that like the world where that happens is an incredibly different world. And I don't want to say we also don't have right now hover cars. So, it's a ways away. But what I do want to, so I guess what has happened in a lot of different sciences is different ways of managing the data particular to those particular disciplines and their research questions. And that's actually the best approach because it is responsive to the kind of data that is under question that is being managed. And so I think we actually can look to different disciplines who do this. Usually, different engineering disciplines, astrophysics, and the thing that is coming to mind right now is the UC Santa Cruz Genome Browser, where you have your own genomic data set and you can upload it for comparison to other sequences that are there in the browser, but you retain that data and you can analyze it using that platform. You don't have to share the data if you don't want to, but the benefit actually comes from sharing the data. So 10 years ago, I was on a funded project to understand what we could do if we could get people to share their health data, right? A lot of people use sensors to share their health data or to gather their own health data. There's this belief that if you gathered a whole bunch of your heart rate data, you could, and your genetic data and so on, you could have these breakthroughs. And the barriers for that, people were unsure about sharing their data, and they felt that it maybe had a value that they should be compensated for if they were going to share it. Well, it's one of those things where actually your own personal individual data is practically worthless. In aggregate is when it's valuable, right? So you really only get the benefit if there's a platform for sharing and comparing and analyzing to which you have contributed that data. So I think that, and we see that, say, for hobbyists who do genetic genealogy. You can get your genetic test. It's worthless unless you compare it to everyone else in the database. Your genes don't tell you anything except in comparison, and that's the case with a lot of this data, right? So this is a comment and not a question, but I hope it provokes some questions. But I want to wrap it up. You can't see what I'm looking at, but in a second I'm going to show you this pyramid that's from Brian Nosek from Open Science Framework. It's a pyramid. At the bottom it says infrastructure. Then it says user interface experience, communities, incentives, and policy. Policy is the tiniest tip there. And so this goes from a hierarchy from make it possible, make it easy, make it normative, make it rewarding. And only after you've done that should you be thinking about policy, trying to make it required in any way. So I'm going to hand the mic off, and I'm going to just show people who can't see my screen the screen. And I think there's one more question.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody? Did anybody on the panel want to comment or respond?
And the only thing I would add is that there's so much that can be generated, but just as a reminder, a lot of my time over the past 10 years has been spent just trying to get broadband connectivity to rural America. And that we can go clear as far as you want to in the stratosphere in terms of data collection and what we can do with that and new and different technology, but we're still, specifically in many rural areas, we're still trying to get connectivity there. And so hopefully we can get there now with some federal funding. But I mean, that's an important reminder, I think, that we're still, I don't know if you want to call that square one, but we're still a ways back here too. And that's obviously, as you know, a pretty significant challenge.
Might add just one more thing in regards to the data, the content. We'll probably continue to have conversations on it. Often one thing, and this is putting my technology hat back on, that seems to be overlooked is the security of that data. When I look at that data, whether it's real-time machine data or being able to get the tractor to run on the ground, I look at as food security is a national security. That's how I look at that. And I think about that when we go out into the fields and we're relying on a satellite to drive our tractor or combine or what have you. Those satellites are vulnerable, whether they're high orbit, low orbit, what have you. So it's when you get into business continuity planning, if you don't think and put that sort of hat on with regards to your data, I think we're being don't give it enough justice that it really deserves. So there's a lot there, but it's of concern. So we all like to eat.
All right. Hi, I'm Derek Weitzel. I'm a university researcher here at Nebraska. And I'm wondering, maybe this is a question for like funding agencies. Do funding agencies, USDA, NSF, NIH, do they encourage or allow the researcher to pay the farmer for their data to add value to it? Is that, I don't know where I would put that on the NSF budget form. I have no idea. But so where do they allow it? Do they encourage it? Should they encourage this?
Are you talking private sector or university? Would they allow the university to pay a producer for that?
Well, admittedly, I'm on the university
Yeah.
side, so that's I'm most curious on that side. I'm sure on private they could probably figure out how to pay for that, but from like the funding agencies, from USDA, NIH, governmental agencies.
I don't know of any prohibition against paying a producer for their data of any kind, unless someone else does.
I would really say from a producer, at least in our case, we're more apt to share with educational institutions our data because we know what the purpose is, or we know it's helping us all. That's probably our comfort level or our trust level is most with academia, if you will, today.
Yeah, I think as a researcher, I would support, paying a producer for that. But most of the time, the university has research facilities and research farms. We get our data mostly from there. But it'll be really good option, So if you want to work with a producer outside of your state, you need strong collaborations. But if you don't have collaborations, it's at least providing a monetary incentive for those producers to share the data would be nice.
Okay. All right, let's thank our panelists.